We are live. All right. Now we should have everything set up. All you God of War enjoyers. This first one is from IGN. It is a graphics comparison across PS5, PS4 Pro, and PS4. What's up, Sean?
Tell me what went wrong?
Imagine. What's up, Jab? What's up, Ant? What's up, Jack? We want to check out Skillup's review.
Kratos?
Send that out real quick.
Are you joining me?
And we're not alone. Behind you! Look out! Right side, brother! Behind you! Look out!
Still hungry?
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
You need to eat. Eat.
Looks exactly the same to you. Probably not going to notice a ton of difference. But keep in mind, you're probably not watching this stream on a 4K TV or monitor. I want to see Skillup's review. No surprise he recommended it.
This video is brought to you by SteelSeries and their range of premium wireless headsets. Ragnarok is a good excuse to spoil yourself, so give yourself the gift of 3D audio and industry-leading sound. Use offer code SKILLUP for 12% off your purchase. Click the link below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Let's begin with a discussion about spoilers. My number one objective in this video is not to review this video game well. That is a secondary objective. My primary objective is to protect your enjoyment of the game by avoiding almost anything
spoilers
that may be considered a spoiler. I say almost because anything is a spoiler in a certain context. The fact that Kratos is in this game is a spoiler if you want to slice it that way, but practically speaking, any major reveal, epic boss battle, special event or location, anything that may reasonably be considered a spoiler, I am not including in this video. Put another way, if it was a surprise to me, it will still be a surprise to you even after having watched this video.
Casual skill up
Okay,
W.
so God of War Ragnarok. Now, you already know that God of War Ragnarok is a good video game. Even without having played it, you can feel it in your jellies. What you want to know, and what everyone will be asking over the coming weeks, months, and years, is does this sequel somehow outdo its predecessor? I think that is a fundamentally flawed question when it comes to Ragnarok, because I don't think you should conceive of it as a sequel. It is instead the second and final chapter in a two-part saga. Kill Bill Volume 2
It's basically called a
was not
DLC.
the sequel
Holy.
to Kill Bill Volume 1, any more than Avengers Endgame was a sequel to Infinity War. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is one book that Tolkien published in 3 parts. You may feel like The Return of the King is a better part of the story than Fellowship was, or that Empire is better than Jedi.
Automatic upgrade.
It doesn't really matter, because those sagas were so powerful at various points and in their conclusions that it's the saga that stays with you, not the minor quibbles about where parts of it might be strong or weak. I say all of this because God of War Ragnarok is an absolutely extraordinary conclusion to this saga. It is remarkable. I marveled constantly at the power of the creative minds behind this.
It looks awesome.
Could make it so.
For sure.
How can you write a Greek murder god into the mythology of the Norse without it seeming ridiculous? How can you challenge and reframe almost every single preconceived notion you might have about that mythology without ever walking away from it or being untrue to it? How can you take those legendary 9 realms and breathe life into them, make them playable, make them explorable, make them stunning to behold and fill them with secrets and stories? How do you deliver combat that definitely walks the line between overwhelming complexity and approachability?
I enjoyed 2018.
Functionality
That was cool.
and spectacle. How the fuck do you get it to run at 120 FPS? And most importantly, How do you ground all of this in a tale of a father and son so scared of losing one another
Sup, Captain?
they are constantly pushing each other away, free falling into a prophecy they are both desperate to avert but make more certain with every spoken word and deed? God of War Ragnarok has better combat than the first game. Better open worlds. It looks better. It runs better. It has more bosses.
Lots
more
of understanding
gear,
in
more
the building.
puzzles, more characters, more set piece moments, more everything. But I'll be honest and say that most of that doesn't really matter to me. 10 or 15 years from now, I won't remember the newly expanded skill perk customization system, or the improvements to combat UI, or the clever open world puzzles.
I hear it because you
encountered in
say you liked it,
Hellheim.
but a tad
What I'll
overrated.
remember
Yeah,
is that Ragnarok
that's how
met
people
the
are.
moment. It continued, expanded, and concluded.
It definitely
this saga
wasn't as
with
good as
such
people were saying
power
it-
that it not
were
only
telling me it
stands on
was.
its own, but it achieves the
But
impossible
it was
task
a good
of
game.
somehow making God of War 2018 better. That is the power of a good ending. It imbues the preceding journey with more significance, and it protects that story for all time, enshrining it as something worth revisiting and worth sharing with others. That is Ragnarok's biggest accomplishment, not its frame rate or its boss battles or its loot. It's the fact that it concludes this saga so masterfully that you'll immediately want to go right back to the start of it to experience it all again. I want to start with a look at technical stuff first, because the rest of Ragnarok is so strong that I expect its technical excellence will be overlooked and taken for granted. It begins with its suite of options and accessibility features. Consistent with the standard that Sony continues to set in this space, the menu offers a level of customization typically reserved for PC games. As you'd expect, there are 4 difficulties available. You can switch between the first 3 at any time, but the hardest difficulty, Give Me God of War, could only be enabled at the start of a playthrough. I played through on the normal mode, which is Give Me Balance, and I must say that I think it was a little easy, as I was completing so much side content that I often over-leveled encounters. My advice to you is that if you're planning that sort of completionist playthrough, you may want to consider playing it on those harder difficulties, since I suspect you'll have a better time than I did. Embedded in the gameplay menu is a raft of options I'd really recommend taking a look at. For example, puzzle timing is one. There are some time-based challenges in this game that are more annoying than anything else, and I found giving myself more time to do them was an upgrade. Same goes for auto pickup, which is a huge deal because you have to pick up a lot of stuff in this
Puzzle
game,
time.
and being able to just walk over to it and automatically pick it up is much better than having to spam the circle button 80,000 times. The other thing I'd recommend tinkering with is the tutorial mode settings, since I did find these popped up a little too often and they didn't add a lot of value when they did. I'd set this to minimal if I were you. You won't miss out on anything essential and you'll be less distracted. In the graphics and camera menu, you will see a slider for motion blur. I am very on the record for not liking motion blur. I often disable it entirely. Here though, I didn't feel the need to do that. Even at its max settings, it didn't feel remotely disruptive, and I actually
Spider-Man.
found it to be an improvement versus being disabled. That's personal preference though, but my takeaway is that motion blur isn't always bad, and Ragnarok is a really good example of that. On the PS5, which is where I reviewed the game, there are some graphical modes to choose from, and these are pretty crazy. There's a resolution mode that aims for 4K at 30 FPS, and a performance mode that delivers a very solid 60 FPS with the dynamic resolution. On top of that, if your TV supports HDMI 2.1, then an additional option opens up, allowing you to enable a high frame rate mode, which delivers 4K at 40 FPS, or a dynamic resolution supporting up to 120 FPS. I can't show that to you here, as most capture devices can't handle HDMI 2.1 yet, but it's there, and I guess we're all going to have to tune into the Digital Foundry breakdown to see how well it performs. I can tell you that 60 FPS performance mode is as rock solid as Kratos' abs. In my 37-hour playthrough, I noticed one instance of frame drop, and it was during some random exploration. I'm sure that some more detailed analysis will identify some fluctuations in this frame rate, but they were totally indiscernible to me.
So all you people obsessed with frame rate should be solid.
To play a game that ran so well and flawlessly, and it was a stark contrast to many of the games I have recently reviewed. Not pointing any fingers.
Direct shot at Gotham Knights.
It becomes even more remarkable when you see just how good God of War Ragnarok looks.
Man throwing shade.
This recorded footage combined with YouTube's garbage tier compression does not do any justice to just how incredible this game regularly looks. It's a combination of art design and technical wizardry that has produced these beautiful worlds. dense jungles, gilded halls, barren plains, frost-kissed tundra, the megalomania of the Aesir gods building impossibly grand temples to honor themselves, and statues in their own likenesses to serve as silent sentinels.
That was
protecting
very
a
subtle.
reminder of their rule even in their absence. What incredible mythological tourism God of War Ragnarok affords us, and what a brilliant vision of these worlds Santa Monica have rendered for us here. You may wonder how much of a visual leap this game is versus the last, and the truth is, it's not much of a leap. Ragnarok does look unmistakably better, particularly in texture detail, environmental density, and lighting effects, but it still looks quite similar to the last game. It is a subtle but noticeable improvement, not an overhaul or a profound uplift. Keep in mind, this is at its core a PS4 game that will ship to last-gen consoles, but even despite that, I just cannot fathom any reasonable person looking at God of War Ragnarok and thinking, that looks shit. Restrained by old hardware though it may be, it still looks better than 98% of games on the market today. One complaint I had about Ragnarok was one that I thought could be put down to the PS4 holding the game back, but it turns out that that probably isn't the case. Ragnarok is stuffed full to bursting with those shimmy sequences where you slide down a narrow gap to get from one area to the other. Conventional wisdom is that this is used to mask loading sequences, which they can be used for, but apparently they are rarely used for that purpose. As confirmed by a developer from Insomniac who worked on Spider-Man and another one who was the director of The Last of Us,
Art of the God of War.
this technique is more about boxing the player into spaces. Bayonetta and Devil May Cry have their magic walls that appear and vanish. God of War
What up, Craig?
has arrow crevices.
Happy
No
Thursday.
matter the justification, it's frustrating to be honest, given that you are constantly edging yourself through crevice after crevice. If it's part of the level design language that exists to serve the combat side of the gameplay, then I think some new language is required in future. By the way, on the topic of load times, when you do encounter them, typically after a death, they
Tsushima's
are
3
very
years
quick.
old.
Here is an example.
The argue looks better. It's mainly because of the art design. That's what really makes Ghost of Tsushima shine.
Not too shabby at all. Outside of that, God of War makes use of the DualSense controller.
Plus,
but it's
they do
a fairly
have.
lightweight
Plus, they did release
implementation. The adaptive triggers are
official
only rarely
upgraded
used.
PS5
Only during
version.
pre-scripted sequences where Kratos has to hack through something with his axe. It would have been interesting to see some part of the combat sandbox make use of them, but given that this is also a PS4 game, I can understand why that didn't happen. The biggest benefit the DualSense brings is haptic feedback, which continues to be such an awesome upgrade over the standard rumble from previous generations. In combat, in exploration, in cutscenes, this controller is always conveying something to you in ways that you will notice, even if you're not paying attention to it. It's so present that it absolutely crunches through the battery. I'd go long sessions where I'd have to burn through 2 fully charged controllers inside of like 10-ish hours. The DualSense is putting in the work, and I continue to believe what I said a while back, that there are 2 next-gen consoles, but only 1 next-gen controller. And while the adaptive triggers are a little wasted, the haptics are certainly not. Incidentally, there is full button remapping available in the menu, as well as the option for motion controls.
Oh, you gotta wear Sophie.
I didn't use that, but it's nice that it's there,
This is
since I
Marvel's
know more
Avengers.
than a few people like when games offer motion controls.
Never in a
as an
million
option.
years.
The final technical element to call out is audio. On the PS5, Ragnarok does support 3D audio using both stereo
10 hours,
and
get some
USB
sleep.
headphones.
Skill up.
It's difficult to
Gets
compare
no
this
sleep.
with the previous game because, to be frank, I don't quite remember anything specific.
He is
about
a
the
video game
original game's
reviewer.
audio, but I will tell you that the audio here is excellent, both in terms of the overall soundscape employed and the utility
Survivor
of
will
that
be better?
3D audio.
Probably.
One of the complaints about 2018 was that its over-the-shoulder view was too narrow, and its combat HUD
Fallen Order
clear enough
was
to
peak.
warn you about off-screen threats. That stuff has been improved here, but I found myself relying on directional audio cues more than I did before. You are being fed a lot of positional data while you're fighting, and those crucial information-bearing sounds are prioritized in the sound mix so you can react to them. Finally, bugs. I will tell you, in 37 hours played, I experienced 2 minor issues. One where Kratos kind of glitched on a ledge for a split second and then he was fine. Another one where he clipped into an invisible wall. 37 hours, 2 minor glitches. Whether it is the options menu, accessibility, visual fidelity, performance, load times,
Maybe this is
controls,
Jazz Survivor
audio,
DLC.
or bugs and polish, Sony's first-party studios continue to maintain an extraordinarily high bar, and Ragnarok is yet another example.
So it looks
of
like
this. It's a
so it looks like
technical
this is
tour
a
de force
finished game.
for many other titles would be its centerpiece, but But here, it's at risk of being
Two glitches
overshadowed by
unacceptable.
how good the rest of the
Facts.
package is. You
Facts.
get so swept up in Ragnarok that you'll often fail to remember that this is all just code.
So he found
Some people sat at a
two
bunch
glitches-
of computers for a really long time
two
to make
glitches
this.
on
They did
PS5.
an extraordinary job bringing these
So
characters,
there's going to be like
this world, this
10 on
action,
PS4.
and this saga to life.
Sonic Frontier is better.
God of War Ragnarok begins some 3 years after the events of the first game. Kratos, born a Spartan and forced to carve a
Something
path
tells
through
me,
the Greek pantheon, has found his way to the
Sonic
realms
Frontiers
of Thor
is
and
not going to
Odin
be
and Freya
a
and the
Game of the Year
world
contender.
serpent Jormungandr. In this new world, Kratos takes a wife and has a son, Atreus, but Kratos' upbringing was cruel and the life he was forced to lead hard. He doesn't know how to show love to his son because he was never shown any himself. And when Kratos' wife dies, she sends her husband and her son on a pilgrimage that seems in no small part intended to bring them together. The pilgrimage did just that, but it also put Kratos and Atreus on a collision course with the gods of these realms, and ultimately reveals a prophecy that
Imagine
everyone,
releasing a
friend
game
or foe alike, are
that
destined
isn't
to
filled with
avoid.
bugs at launch.
That prophecy is Ragnarok, the Norse myth of the end times, where the gods and their armies do battle one last time. This
That's
is
not
an
how we do
ancient
things.
myth that we've seen rendered repeatedly across popular media, from books to comics to TV shows to the MCU, and that's just in the last half century. Before that, the myth of Ragnarok endured for at least 1,000 years, as literature and archaeological findings reference it as far back as 920 AD. The sources all shed different light on it and tell it in slightly different ways, but the core elements remain unchanged. The word Ragnar means the ruling gods, and Rock means something akin to fate. Ragnarok, then, is the story of the fate of the gods, and it always culminates in their destruction. You may be feeling a little uncomfortable at this point. You're like, dude, you said no spoilers. I want to be clear that knowing the prophecy of Ragnarok is not a spoiler. Rather, knowing the mythology is essential to properly enjoying God of War Ragnarok. I would say right now that if you are not brushed up on this stuff, go and watch some YouTube videos, go read some Wikipedia entries, go read a book if you've got the time. I really recommend Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, a fantastic retelling of these stories and characters pulled from the historical records of the mythology, but generously embellished on to give it so much drama and villainy and heroism and flair. It's awesome. I don't say that you should know the story of Ragnarok so you can track it to some inevitable conclusion and point out Easter eggs along the way like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. I say it because God of War Ragnarok is a dance with that prophecy. In one moment, Ragnarok seems inevitable, and nothing anyone does matters because everything, even the struggle against it, has already been written. In the next moment, the will of Kratos and Atreus to defy their fate seems to pay dividends, and perhaps they aren't struggling for naught. But you can only see so many of these successes and setbacks if you know who these people are, and what these locations, relics, and events mean. Without that grounding, so much of Ragnarok's deft dance with destiny is lost on you. That's why I think it is so important to read up before you saddle up for this experience. I will tell you that of all the things I loved about Ragnarok, and there were many, the way that Santa Monica's writers used this prophecy as a launching pad for their own story was their greatest accomplishment. I think the power of God of War 2018 was its emotional core, that connection between father and son, both of them terrified of each other for different reasons. Seeing them break through that fear and come together was more powerful than any other part of that story. Here in Ragnarok, I was just in awe of this fucking plot. It is so clever.
Language.
It's like a murder mystery where you think you know so many things along the way because you've seen it 1,000 times, but you don't know shit. It reminds me of that quote, "Who you gonna trust, me or your lying eyes?" Your knowledge of this
What up,
prophecy
Jace?
is both necessary but also your
Upstream,
greatest
appreciate
enemy,
you.
as Santa
Uncle
Monica
Casual,
leads you by the
that
nose
game.
so expertly that you could swear you can hear the writer's room cackling as you sit mouth agape at each big reveal. You're in for such
games
a
die
ride with
faster
this.
and faster
I'm
these
so
days.
jealous of you for getting to experience it for the first
Dead
time.
during the
As for
review
Kratos and
embargo.
Atreus, their relationship has moved into a new phase here. Kratos has learned how to show love to his son, but Atreus has become a teenager, and teenagers are dicks. Rebellious, foolhardy, overconfident, easily distracted, duplicitous. Atreus longs to know who he really is. And what
Apparently this
significance he
game
holds
has
in the context of
pretty
this
much no
prophecy
bugs.
that looms so large over them.
2 bugs
In
and
his view,
37
only by
hours on
understanding all of
PS5
that can he
for a
avoid
skill
this
up.
grim fate. Whereas for Kratos, the further you stay away from all that stuff, the less likely it is to come to pass. That is the central tension that pushes forward many of these events, but also the underlying emotional tension that dominates their relationship.
Read a book. That's honest
different from
officer.
the first game, but equally powerful. And no matter how big everything,
I
can
definitely
get,
recommend
it's often
reading
the
Neil
small
Gaiman
moments
if you're going to
between
read
father and
if you're going to
son
read
that
any
continue
book.
to be the most powerful.
Neil
moments in the game.
Gaiman
Special mention
goes
must
crazy.
go to the broader cast of characters. Many of them are returning from the previous game, but their role here has been substantially enlarged. Before, they were somewhat ancillary. They almost didn't exist separate from their relation to Kratos and Atreus. But here, they are so much more fleshed out, and they become an ensemble cast rather than a supporting cast. Some of the most impactful moments in this entire experience have nothing to do with Kratos or Atreus.
37
That
hours.
is how significant these characters have become in this story, and it is all the richer for it. Just as I delight in how much Ragnarok fucks with our preconceived notions of this ancient prophecy, so too does it totally upend
These
our
exploit
conception
glitches
of
and
who
time
these
travel.
gods are. There are gods not yet revealed, so I won't do that here, but we do know of Thor, voiced by Ryan Hurst,
Fat
and
Thor.
Odin, voiced by Richard Schiff. Now, I know it's cringe to admit it in the modern era, but The West Wing is literally my favorite show ever, and Toby Ziegler was literally my favorite character ever, and to hear him voice the
Atreus
All-Father
finna
in
be a
this
lazy
way,
man.
it was a little bit special.
Ain't no-
Both
there's
Odin
like-
and Thor.
how many
the way
ladies
they've been
are there
realized
in
here is
God of War? Like,
absolutely not what we
one?
expect. Not needlessly throwing away
What
traditional notions
ladies?
of these characters for shock value's sake alone, but rather delving deeper into them. Deeper than any popular rendition I've seen.
Who's Atreus back in
It
The
felt
Witch?
like real characters rather than just mythological action figures. Thor is so much more than his hammer, and Odin is not the father figure you've seen Anthony Hopkins play. There is a lot to celebrate about God of War Ragnarok, and I suspect that different people will take different things from it, but I'm all but certain that it's the story that will
They're gonna
stay
touch
with
on
you
Loki.
the most. It's different in its goals than 2018 was.
We'll see.
2018 was this gut punch, or a sledgehammer swung straight at your feels. I didn't feel the need to play 2018
likes MILFs.
again because I
Fair
feel
enough.
like that gut punch, you can't get that twice. But Ragnarok
He is at that
more
age.
subtle, more elaborate, more intricate. There are so many layers to this story that it demands multiple playthroughs, each one allowing you to sift more carefully through it, taking away more each time as you come better prepared for its twists and turns.
Crazy, there's been 2 glitches in 37 hours of gameplay.
God of War Ragnarok delivers some very meaty improvements to the semi-open world design template that it delivered in the first game, and I'd say that level design and quest structure is the most noticeable gameplay improvement between this game and the first. If you're at all unfamiliar with God of War, it has a hybridized
picking this
structure
up.
that combines linear sequences with
don't know
semi-open
yet.
world exploration. When Kratos and Atreus resolve to do something, that will often take them to a specific place that is only accessible while
I don't
they're
wanna-
working towards
I don't
that
wanna buy the
specific goal.
game
Temples, sections of jungle,
for their
entire
channel,
realms that exist as curated
unless
spaces,
people are actually going to
tailor-made
watch
for
the
combat
streams.
arenas and boss encounters and set-piece moments. By the way, fantastic. So many sequences.
So
in this
jury's
game
still
are
out so
incredible.
far.
And not just because they're violent or big or loud. It's about their choreography. The storyboarding of these sequences. Oh man, I wish I could show you some of this stuff, but I can't. You'll just have to trust me when I say that if it's spectacle or action or just fun that you're after, then Ragnarok will not disappoint you. In the
Horizon
slightest.
Forbidden West
So,
War.
outside of these more scripted sequences and these linear levels, the realms you'll visit will often open up into these semi-open world
I remember
spaces. I keep saying
Horizon
semi-open
had
world because
a
they're not
few more
truly open
issues.
world. There are 9 realms in the Norse mythology.
It didn't
I won't
have
tell you
bugs,
how many you'll be visiting here,
but it did have
they are
poppin'.
distinct realms. You'll travel to them via the branches of the world tree, and when you're there, you won't find them contiguous spaces like, say, Horizon Forbidden West. You'll find them more hub-based, each realm containing a number of distinct biomes connected by some sort of
Show of
thoroughfare.
hands who bought
This will
that
be
Black
familiar
Panther
to you
skin.
if you played the first game, because that's how Midgard was built.
I have
the
not
Lake of the
bought
Nine serving as
a-
the central hub connecting
I have not
various areas.
spent
that
any money
contain
on
puzzles,
that
combat
game
challenges, boss
in
encounters,
quite a
and more.
while.
So imagine Midgard.
I didn't even
then
log
imagine
on
it
today.
bigger, and then imagine more stuff on it, and then imagine multiple of those open world spaces. Again, I won't say how many, but I will say that it is not an insignificant number, and none of these spaces are slouches. They are all full of stuff to see and do, full of spaces worth exploring, and full of stories worth finding. That's one of the interesting things
I
about
think this
these
is like
spaces.
a-
They each have
I
their
think I
own
read this was like
meta-narrative
a
that exists separate from the main
70-hour
storyline
game
in that realm. There are lots of
to
side
get-
quests
to
you'll
complete
discover, many
everything.
of which will dovetail into a broader story about some threat in that region, or trying to uncover the events from a time long past. It definitely helps to read the lore entries you discover along the way, as they provide so much flavor, but even without reading those, you will feel like there's a reason behind the stuff you're doing. What is that stuff? It's open world stuff, sort of. I don't want to big it up too much because it's hardly groundbreaking, but nor do I think it's phoned in. There are chests that are hidden behind puzzles and bosses perched atop towers and ghosts who ask you to find their remains. It's familiar, but nestled within this are some of Ragnarok's best locations, best puzzles, best encounters.
Some
of the most interesting and moving moments can be found in this side content. So while you can take a lot of this stuff and drop it into familiar buckets, there are some nuggets hidden within this that make that fossicking absolutely worthwhile. When I play games with side content, I am not the player that seeks out side content because it's there. I'm the player that does it if that side content actually calls to me to do it. And I always felt called here in Ragnarok. I think you can beeline this game in around 20 hours or so. That's a guess. But I spent around 37 because I did almost every bit of side content I could before being forced back onto the main path. And I would estimate that completing every bit of side content for a platinum trophy or whatever is going to run you at least 45 to 50 hours.
50
Critical to
hours
my enjoyment was the
for
fact that
50 hours for
exploration
platinum
is a real feature of these spaces. This is
20
not a
hours
map-marker-driven
for
game, as very
a quick
little
run.
of what you're working towards is marked on your map. You really do have to just press forward to see what you find. You'll often see an objective in the distance.
You never replay
Not quite how to get
2018?
there.
You're just starting your
Stuff
new
in
game
the
plus
environment doesn't do
on
that
Gotham Knights.
flashy highlight
Yeah.
thing. You actually need to look at these environments, look at the detail within them, and engage them. You don't just glide across space with your eyes fixed on a distant map marker. You contend with these environments, and that contention becomes more interesting and more satisfying as these realms slowly open up to you. Having said all of that, a lot of this open world stuff is linked to a very classically inspired resource hunt. There are a lot of chests filled with a lot of
under
hack
50
silver
hours.
hidden throughout these lands.
I finished
You collect
2018
crafting materials to upgrade your gear.
and, like,
You collect
I didn't
relics,
do-
which
I didn't do a
are
bunch
sold
of
to the
side content.
blacksmith for more hack silver that you won't end up needing because
So I
it
did that in,
flows
like,
so
15.
readily. I'm not sure that this is fair criticism or not, because this is ultimately a fantasy adventure RPG, so chests filled with stuff fits, I guess, but it's so many chests, and so often the stuff they contain isn't truly valuable to you. I was chasing this stuff because I really loved exploring these spaces and fighting as I did so, but I think if there's any part of God of War that's due for some overhaul, it's this resource chase that feels a little played out when set against a game that is so cutting edge in almost every other regard.
This sounds like there's going to be more to it. 2018 was mostly cutscenes and puzzles.
I would say that for me personally,
It really
God of
didn't
War's
take that
melee
long to get
combat
through.
is probably my favorite melee combat in any video game. I'm not saying it's the best, I'm just saying it's my favorite. I enjoy the slower Souls-like combat, particularly for its breadth across different weapon categories and its enemy boss design. I enjoy the fast-paced combat of character action games like Bayonetta for the depth of their combat systems.
You couldn't get into 2018, couldn't enjoy Kratos without the Greek mythology.
Can look and
That's
feel
fair.
if you invest the time. God of War's combat is that sweet spot between the two, though. Its pacing is very even, giving you time between each swing to consider your next swing. Its parry windows are generous, inviting you to parry rather than turtling behind a shield. Air juggle hang time is very long, giving you an absurd amount of time to take
I'm
advantage
definitely
of an
enjoying
airborne enemy with a
Gotham
follow-up
Knights.
combo. The combos you
I'm almost done my second, my new game plus playthrough.
Off without feeling mindless.
I'm like
and truly
towards the end with
understanding
Red Hood.
capabilities of each weapon opens up your combo
I think I'll finish
potential
that tomorrow
substantially.
on stream.
And the framing of all this action with its camera pans and its dynamic slowdowns makes combat look truly awesome. Almost like pre-scripted cutscenes at times, ones that you remain fully in control of. God of War lacks the depth and breadth of other melee combat games, but it is the pinnacle of approachability, allowing you to feel like a total fucking badass on your first playthrough. You don't need to study this game to be good at it. You don't need to train in practice areas to learn combos. There's just enough here that you can wrap your arms around all of it without too much effort. And while that means you'll hit that skill cap ceiling pretty quickly, it also means that it's not going to take very long to start having fun with all the tools at your disposal. That's a blessing and a curse at the best of times, but I think it's a little more of a curse here in Ragnarok, because the combat system
Back at the
has
40.
not advanced a great deal versus the previous game. So if
Yeah.
you hit that skill
I think
ceiling in the
I
past,
think I'll do a
you're gonna
build
hit it
video
even faster here.
soon.
And as I mentioned earlier, if you're doing a lot of side content,
Try it out.
that skill ceiling is lower than ever, as enemies
I got everyone at level 40.
at least on normal.
I've got
difficulty.
everybody's
Now, to be clear,
momentum
there are some
abilities,
new elements
all
to
of
the
them,
combat sandbox.
even the secret
Many of
one.
the combos and abilities from the last game return here, but there are plenty of new ones added as well. Having said that, none of them really change the flow of combat or meaningfully enlarge your capabilities. They're more variations on the way you deal damage rather than new ways to deal damage. The biggest addition to the combat sandbox is elevating the importance of Shield Bash, which now interrupts enemies who are about to launch
Toy
certain
Avengers is the only
attacks.
thing you need.
That is really nice, actually. It works
Yeah.
super well, but even it feels iterative. Same goes for
I
the
was
new combat
crying
perk
laughing
system. You'll still unlock new abilities
when
by
I read-
reaching
when I
certain
read the
level
blog
thresholds,
today.
but now some of those abilities will have a mastery system attached to them, where if you use those abilities enough times, you'll be able to modify them slightly. For example, doing more damage or applying more stun
Like, it
or
has to be
elemental
intentional.
effect. This is a great
No one
system
could be
for
this out of
pushing you
touch.
to use abilities that you might not otherwise use, but its actual impact can scarcely be felt since the power of these upgrades is so minor. Enemy variety has been noticeably expanded though.
This
and that does
gameplay
make a
right here
big
from Skill
difference.
already shows
Enemies
more boss
play
fight
a
than
wide
2018.
variety of
Facts,
roles
bro.
in the combat chess, and Santa
That
Monica
was my
do a
main.
good
That was my
job of
main problem
combining
with
them to create
2018.
pressure
There
on
wasn't
you
enough
to mix up
fighting.
the play style. Some of that relates to the new
Like, I didn't feel-
verticality present
I
in
didn't feel
combat
like I had
spaces.
the
Enemies
chance
often have ranged attacks
to
and
really
perch in
learn and
certain
engage with the
positions,
combat.
forcing you to hit them with your ranged attacks or go up to meet them.
'Cause it
Fighting
felt
near
like there
ledges
wasn't enough
allows you
to
to
it.
knock enemies down to lower
And there
levels
was
so
enough
you can
fighting.
follow up with a devastating drop down attack.
There was
In
just a
broad
lot of
terms,
walking
the changes
around,
to
a lot of
Ragnarok's
cutscenes, a lot of
combat feel
puzzles.
more like a response to criticisms to the first game rather than meaningful expansion. Boss diversity is a big one. There are a number of repeated
Bear.
bosses here, but there are a much larger total number of those bosses. You won't have to fight 8 trolls or whatever. Similarly, the combat HUD has been improved with clearer indications for incoming attacks, plus Mimir will often yell out to warn you when shit's about to go down.
Behind you, watch out!
I suspect that some people will look at how similar this
They're just
combat
finally
is and feel
dying.
disappointed by that.
It's
I get
been dying the whole
I think
time.
That's totally fair.
Just
For me
slowly.
personally, though, I just love what this combat already was, and I didn't need it to change all that much. I think it's well and truly strong enough to survive a second outing, and while I would have appreciated some bold changes, I'm still very happy with what's here, and I'm always excited to charge headlong into the next encounter, be it a minor trash mob or some epic boss battle. I know that's been a theme that I've come back to a few times in this review, the idea of comparison, of iteration, of evolution. I know that that's going to be a big part of the way this game is talked about before launch, as everyone will be reading the tea leaves scattered throughout these reviews and guessing this way or that about whether or not the game is evolved enough, or whether the graphics are next gen enough, or whether or not this is an expansion,
I think it's a bigger
or a
issue.
DLC or a sequel. Or
A lot of people aren't even mad
Let me make one
anymore.
prediction.
They just don't care.
All of that noise will immediately fall silent when people get their hands on this for themselves, because that's when everyone will see that the conclusion to this saga
What you guys are
wasn't
keep
hinged
making content
on
about skins?
gameplay improvements
Well,
or graphical
that won't be me.
fidelity or dual sense functionality, welcome though they may be. It hinges on the myth of these gods and on the prophecy of their downfall, and on this story of a father and son desperate to make their own fate. That is it. And the story that Santa Monica weave here is so masterful and so affecting that all of those secondary considerations just evaporate. My impossible hope for this game was that it would somehow make me feel just some of the things that the first game made me feel. It didn't do that. What it did was make me feel other things, new things, things that I wasn't expecting but were just as compelling and powerful.
You'll never ever be Avengers 2.
Sony
You're not
Santa
wrong.
Monica succeeded so
That's coming from
comprehensively here
Capte.
that I am just
Oh,
in awe of the talent that it took to produce it, and so thankful that I got the chance to play it. You are going to absolutely love it. I strongly recommend God of War Ragnarok.
That's a strong recommend from Skill Up. Let's see what IGN did. I'm sure IGN gave it IGN probably. I don't think IGN is going to rock the boat. I think they're going to give it like a 9 or a 10.
About time. You think you can come here, become a daddy, get a clean slate? That ain't how it works. You're a destroyer.
IGN with the 7.
How do you follow up on one of the greatest video games of all time? Sony Santa Monica finds itself
10
in
out
a
of 10
situation
masterpiece.
not dissimilar to when Francis Ford Coppola created the
Then you're
sequel
gonna
to
give it
his
a 10 or a
mod-movie
7.
masterpiece, The Godfather. Like part 2 of the Corleone story, God of War
10 or-
Ragnarok
no, a 10
puts
or a 5.
fierce younger member of the family directly under the microscope. In doing so, it manages to reach the heights of its predecessor, and in some ways, even tower above it. The writing, performances, and music
Sounds like
are
a
each
10.
exceptional, bringing this expansive Norse tapestry to life. But even as it holds your heart in one hand with its elegantly told story,
So I was
it's
gonna fund
crunching
it.
bones in the other with
Gotham Knights, I'll definitely fund that.
ferocious combat. It all binds together to forge a monumental action epic that adds yet another impressive landmark to the video game landscape.
Yeah, this sounds like a 10 out of 10 review.
You've already taught me discipline. I need more than that. I need answers. Answers you don't have.
Answers only your mother had.
Keeping things broad and spoiler-free, Kratos' story picks up a few years after the final revelations of 2018's God of War. The apocalyptic Ragnarok is coming, and its events circle around his son Atreus like one of Odin's ravens. Ragnarok wastes no time in stepping into the action, and after a breakneck opening battle, the first step of this new journey is to leave the frozen realm of Midgard behind and find a missing Norse god in the broader and varied universe. It may not be as tightly a told story as 2018's, but Ragnarok has much grander designs. This is a sprawling epic that always keeps things on the move without
you fight
ever
Thor
becoming
first.
disorientated,
Interesting.
gluing me to the edge of my seat as it repeatedly toyed with expectations. It's an ambition regularly met by stunning execution, with a momentum that never slips as you hurtle towards its bombastic ending. This journey took me just over 28 hours with a fair few side quests completed along the way, but with plenty still left to do afterwards.
There definitely won't be an Avengers
Prophecy
2.
and sacrifice swirl
But
at
there
the
will be other
story's
Marvel
center,
games.
as it repeatedly prods at the concept of destiny.
No
and
one's-
whether
no
blood
one's touching
runs
this
thicker
IP.
than the ink that pens it.
Avengers doesn't need a
doesn't merely
sequel. It needs
offer
a
up
re- it
surface
needs a
level
hard
readings of
reboot.
these themes. Instead, each character and their motives are given the respect they deserve by delving in deep. It's a truly special and fittingly grand conclusion of Kratos' Norse saga. Despite being laden with myth and melodrama, there's still plenty of time for welcome pockets of
Squirrel.
self-aware silliness that almost always elicit a laugh. Whether that be another bizarre dwarven contraption, or the simple thrill of Kratos eating a sausage. When not eating dinner, Kratos' thunderous
What?
voice actor Christopher Judge frequently engages in smartly
Did you say the
realised
simple
dialogue
thrill
with his
of
equally
Kratos eating a
impressive
sausage?
castmates.
Holy.
Make no mistake though, this is firmly Judge's court, and one he frequently dominates. Kratos' traumatic personal history is reflected
man's sitting there
in
watching
everything
Kratos
from
eat
his
sausages.
mournful tone
Holy.
of voice to his appearance.
Atreus! Listen to me.
His Icarus wings are long
said it's
since
thrilling.
clipped, but his complexion is still pale, like
man
a
is
square
down
of wall where a
horrendous.
family portrait used to hang. The everlasting cycle of violence between parents and their children has
Judge
long
will
been a
speak.
theme ever since the original God of War trilogy, although one that was only truly emphasised in 2018's revival. Now it's an inescapable fixture of Ragnarok, an exploration of the rawest and most human of emotions, and what happens when they are channeled through superhuman vessels. Pain leads to anger leads
Bro-
to hate.
bro,
This is
getting
the
thrilled about
genesis
someone
of the
eating a
stalking
sausage is
threat
crazy.
embodied by the incomparable
I'm sorry.
force that is a grieving mother.
That's
Portrayed incredibly
crazy.
with a newfound fury by Danielle Bisutti, Freya is a striking presence to be reckoned with in the sequel. No longer just a helpful witch in the woods, she's given a whole new spectrum of emotional depth to play in, and Ragnarok is all the better for it. Each character is given their own moments to shine throughout.
I just sit in
Sonny
dinner-
Suljic
eating dinner
fires
with the,
back
mayor
regularly
about
with
to
the
fight.
sharp teenage tongue of a brasher, more confident Atreus.
I feel like that's pretty
and
common,
Alistair Duncan's
especially around
severed head
Thanksgiving.
accessory Mimir continues to provide levity and exposition in abundance.
Ah, back to smashing through things for fun and profit. Lovely.
Various newcomers to the vastly expanded cast also deliver fantastic performances, with a particular standout being Leia Hayes, radiating infectious energy from the
Oh, yeah,
mysterious
there's-
Angerboda.
there's two
The
gir-
foul-mouthed
there's two
Brock
girls in
and
this.
skittish Sindri provide pockets of humour,
Atreus-
as
that's
well as a
Atreus'
lot of
girlfriend.
genuinely helpful
That's gonna
info
be Atreus'
along the way,
girlfriend.
as they play a much more central role in the story this time around. Also returning is composer Bear McCreary, whose score, like the Dwarven Smith brothers, goes hammer and tongs from the first moment to the last. There's some truly
God of War is not about
music
fan
to be heard
service.
along the journey, as well as
It's
explosions
about action.
of raw orchestral power during intense fight scenes. Layered writing, impeccable acting, and stunning set
About
design
manly
are all
action.
crucial aspects in driving God of War's filmic aspirations home. But they're also never let down by the rock-solid technical craftsmanship at work. The one continuous camera shot style of 2018's reboot returns, impressively snaking through the entirety of Ragnarok as if mimicking the world serpent Jormungandr himself.
My goodness, what a strapping physique. Capable of an astounding variety of acts of violence, I imagine.
God of War's combat has always been the flashy attraction that draws a crowd in to be wowed by its story, however, and Ragnarok continues that tradition. Kratos' blades whip around in every direction, delivering a clanking fiery pain to any
The
face
parry
they
system
meet.
looks so
Heavy
good.
cleaves of his axe crunch into enemies, making them fold
I like
bloody
Gotham Knights,
origami.
but it
And
needs
yes,
a
that
parry
axe
system.
still slices through the air, meatily lodging itself into anything unfortunate enough to be in its path, before
Parrying
being
an attack
recalled
is
to your
so
palm
satisfying.
with what remains one of the most satisfying button presses ever assigned to a controller. It's all unapologetically fast and undeniably glorious, harking back to the brand of frantic action in which the series was originally rooted. But even with that slight shift to old school action, Ragnarok's eyes are still drawn more to the shimmer of Nathan Drake's gold rather than Bayonetta's platinum. Cinematic spectacle takes precedence
exaggerated
over the
swagger of a
chaotic,
black
bordering
teen.
on cartoonish action of old. The axe feels largely similar to how you remember, and that's no bad thing with its dynamic mix of heavy attacks and ranged power. But how you wield the blades is noticeably different. There's a greater emphasis on using them to hook enemies and maneuver them around the arena, whether that be dragging them in towards you or juggling them in the air like the hottest of potatoes. They're much closer to how they felt in the original games, a nostalgic moveset with a brilliant modern edge. Both weapons have new tricks to show off too. You can Frost Awaken the axe by holding in the triangle button to power up your next attack, or mash the same button while the blades are equipped to ignite them. Even the shield is now more of an offensive tool, and different types can be bought and crafted to fit your playstyle. Runic abilities, special cooldown attacks assigned in your inventory, also return, and
There seems to be much more emphasis on the combat this time around.
Each is devastatingly effective. Brutal finishes on stunned enemies are another enjoyable throwback to the God of War of old. There's noticeably a good amount of variety in the randomly chosen weapon-specific animations too.
Just hacking people up.
Movement is further emphasised by the way you can now grapple up from a distance using the blades and launch across gaps to dive into combat. Taller area design literally adds extra layers to battles, allowing you to leap from a ledge to deliver death from above. Combat sequences can feel akin to Doom kill boxes, as you dash and swing around elevated platforms towards your
these
next
finishers
victim
are so
in
satisfying.
performances of acrobatic bloodshed, juggling cooldowns, Atreus' arrows, and your rage meter to efficiently and spectacularly destroy everyone sent to stop you. Each fight feels like a real occasion, as you slalom your way through ranged, parryable and unblockable attacks in order to sneak in a hit or two. Enemies can now perform powerful but interruptible attacks, signified by a blue ring above their head in addition to their regular skills. A double tap of the shield will sort these out, but get your timing wrong and you're in line for some considerable pain. There are plenty of other big additions to combat that I won't divulge so as not to ruin the sensation of discovering them yourself, but rest assured, Ragnarok has myriad more tools in its bag than God of War 2018 ever did, and is all the more enthralling for it. It all feels exceptional when in full flow, often mesmerising with its top tier action drenched in rhythmic brutality, and is quite simply the best combat I can remember playing in a game. And that just goes for the regular fights. Boss battles are of both a higher quantity and quality, including one encounter that makes the opening Stranger fight from 2018 look like a playground scuffle. It's not just the story bosses either. I fought massive alligator bastards called Dreki on more than one occasion, which were a real event to fight and more of a challenge than 2018's trolls ever posed. It's great to see sprinklings of that old school monster mayhem thrown into the mix, which manages to successfully offset some of the more serious stretches of the story. Smart new puzzle ideas are consistently introduced, and building complexity throughout as more abilities are added to your arsenal. They're often fun and never in danger of slowing your progress to the detriment of the plot. But even so, Atreus or Mimir can't help but come in with a hint far too early and sometimes rob you of that satisfying aha moment. It's a very rare annoyance in a world
Thor
where normally every last word is a joy to listen to. Armor customization has been streamlined, resulting in the
will you let him
removal
jump
of
in
the
this game?
slotting system for a more straightforward upgrading mechanic. Enchantments are now placed inside a separate amulet rather than spread over various pieces of gear. This division makes seeing what you have equipped easier and means you aren't lost delving into too many menus within menus. This also means you can upgrade a piece of armor and take it with you through your journey if your playstyle happens to perfectly click with a certain set, or you just love how it looks. The same goes for weaponry, which can be upgraded, as well as fitted with attachments such as individually named hilts and handles, each with their own perks and bonuses. Who wouldn't want to play with the Stonecutter's knob, after all? Realms old and new are regularly a sight to behold, many looking torn from the pages of fairy tales, stocked with oversized flora and fauna. There's an extra effort to delve deeper into the mythology this time around, and as someone who's a fan of the Nordic source material, it's a real pleasure to see all of the different interpretations of creatures, people and places they inhabit, brought to life in all manner of delightfully weird ways. For example, the dwarven city of Nidavellir is a welcome rural change of scenery, with its many homes and tunnels that Kratos must amusingly crawl around in. It's at the centre of the rocky realm of Svartalfheim, where waterways weave through islets littered with bubbling geysers. There's a real sense that this realm was ripped right out of the Old Norse poetic Edda's home of Iceland. Those geysers are also key to solving many of the puzzles in the region, as you freeze them to create stepping stones and manipulate machinery. Quirks like this help in making each place feel unique. Similarly, fun ideas are introduced in the returning Alfheim, such as reflective crystals that you can ricochet your axe off of to open doors, or even use to blindside unwitting opponents in combat. It's a further example of not only each realm looking distinct, but also feeling distinct to play in from one another. Every location almost feels like a puzzle box that you're gradually unlocking through a combination of brain and brawn as you make your way through it. These worlds bring with them dangerous new threats. If there are any faults to be found in 2018's revival, then modest enemy variety may well have been one of them. However, there is no such issue in Ragnarok, with its bestiary vastly expanded to accommodate all sizes and shapes of creatures. Familiar foes such as Draugr and elves have made their way across, but this time they're joined by creatures like Grimms, which, you guessed it, are pretty grim, scuttling toad people. Then there's a personal favourite, the Einherjar, Aesir warriors who harness the power of the Bifrost that makes a section of your health bar glow before removing that chunk on the next hit. There's an engaging but never unfair difficulty curve throughout as you're met with progressively greater threats.
Well, at least it's attacking someone besides us.
Side missions are sometimes spectacles in their own right. They're a great source of character development as you learn more about your friends and companions by helping them right past wrongs. Some side quests do just present a pure gameplay challenge over extra stories, however, such as hunting down powerful legendary enemies dotted across the realms of Yggdrasil's roots. There is no shortage of genuinely tough side boss encounters either. Chipping away at larger health bars is a really satisfying challenge, and remarkably well balanced against the standard quick kill nature of the majority of Ragnarok's fights. It's yet another testament to the masterful combat design on display. And yes, there are some absolutely tough as nails endgame level challenges to rival the Valkyries of 2018, but I'm gonna let you find out what those are for yourself. There's a substantial slew of collectibles to clean up as well, with Odin's ravens, puzzle chests, artifacts, and much more to find in every corner. There's a ton to be done after the main story has been brought to a close, all of it incredibly Moorish and fun to complete. Ragnarok never once rests on its laurels, throwing new ways to play at you until the very end. Despite having a seemingly endless amount to praise here, I really have barely scratched the surface of what God of War Ragnarok has to offer. I'm deliberately omitting dozens of secrets and surprises. I wouldn't dare spoil what's to come for anyone booting it up for the first time, but rest assured there are both huge story moments and fresh gameplay additions that live up to and often surpass expectations. Taken all together, much like The Godfather Part 2, God of War Ragnarok delivers not only a chapter that reaches the lofty heights of its predecessor, but leaves it impossible to imagine the series without it.
10 out of 10.
An enthralling spectacle to behold, and an even more exciting one to take the reins of, God of War Ragnarok melds action and adventure together to create a new, unforgettable Norse saga. Impeccable
10 out of
writing,
10.
pitch-perfect performances, knockout action, it's a complete work of art from top to bottom. Reflecting its core themes, it's everything a sequel should be, respectful of its legendary lineage, but not afraid to take it to exciting new places. God of War Ragnarok is an almighty achievement, and creates a new high that makes many of its peers look positively mortal by comparison.
10 out of 10. Holy masterpiece. 10 out of 10 from IGN. Holy. 10 out of 10. A masterpiece. I knew from the beginning, like, I was like, there's either going to be a 5 or a 10. Looks like all of these are just masterpiece, masterpiece, masterpiece. Game of the year. Oh, here we go. Hold up. God of War Ragnarok review. Bigger, not better. Uh-oh.
It's one of the most anticipated PlayStation exclusives of all time, and after years of excitement from fans, it's finally here. I'm of course talking about Ape Escape 3. Wait, what? Oh, it's not. Oh, okay, right. God of War Ragnarok.
I'm looking for the negative reviews. Let's hear it.
Hi, I'm Giovanni Colantonio. I'm the gaming section lead at Digital Trends, and I'm here with my review of God of War Ragnarok. Now, in case you don't know, God of War Ragnarok is a sequel to 2018's God of War, which was a reboot of the God of War series that began on the PlayStation 2. Now, this game took a more mature approach to that action series. It was a more introspective, narrative-driven action-adventure game that still starred the god-killing, bloodthirsty Kratos, but he was a little more chilled out this time, or at least trying to be, and that's because he was traveling with his son, Atreus. Now, that game dealt with his struggles of not wanting his son to become like him and follow in his footsteps and repeat his mistakes, becoming a bloodthirsty god killer all his own. That made for a really beautiful experience that's kind of one of the best games of the last
some good cringe.
Consoles.
Here we go.
Now, God of War Ragnarok obviously had to up the stakes because it's a sequel, and it did that because Ragnarok is coming, and that is kind of a big deal. Now, I'm going to say this up front. We're not going to get into spoilers here. I'm not going to talk about any specific story scenes, and we're not going to show any story spoilers or anything like that in the footage. But if you really want to know nothing about it at all, be warned. We're showing footage from the game. It is what it is. Now, this is the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. God of War Ragnarok is bigger than its predecessor, but bigger doesn't inherently mean better, and I want to stress that. This game kind of takes a more is more approach to development, and by that I mean it has a bigger story, more characters, more collectibles, more exploration, more jokes. God, does it have more jokes. Just a lot more jokes. Now, that's a bit of a double-edged sword. In some ways, it makes the game better. In other ways, it makes it a little bit worse, though worse is a really strong word when you're talking about God of War, which is just kind of great. But for the most part, it's kind of neutral. A lot of these changes are just more content, but not necessarily better content. And I'll give you an example of all three of these things in this review. And let's start with something that I think most people are going to be able to agree on with this game, which is that the action is fantastic here, and that should come as no surprise. It still uses the same combat system that made 2018's God of War great. Now, Kratos has his Leviathan axe from the beginning of the game, which is this heavy axe that he can chop enemies up with, but he also gets his Blades of Chaos from the jump too, and that adds for more variety right from the mix. In the previous game, Blades of Chaos came late in the experience, so it's nice to have them up front here. But what's really nice is that developer Santa Monica Studio builds on those systems really well. For example, elemental attacks are a much bigger part of the game here. By holding the triangle button, Kratos can freeze his axe, and that gives him access to new moves that can in turn freeze enemies. Similarly, the Chaos Blades can be kind of lit on fire, and that gives him new moves too. It just adds a lot more variety to the mix and more options when taking on enemies. Now, in addition to that, when you have more moves, sometimes it's really, really tough to get players to actually use them. Because, I mean, you kind of just want to use the most powerful one or two that do the most damage. And God of War Ragnarok has a great solution to that I think every action game should probably do at some point if it has a skill tree. As Kratos uses moves, he'll hit different tiers with it. And when he hits gold tier, he can actually augment that specific move with some sort of buff. So if you have a favorite attack, you can make it so it does more damage, or does more freezing, or makes him a little invulnerable when he's performing it so that he doesn't get interrupted out of it. And that gives this game so much more customization potential. It is fantastic. You can really customize the moveset to your playstyle, which I think is really, really cool. And that pairs really nicely with some of the game's other systems. For example, the RPG systems return here. They're still not necessarily great. There's still the sort of equip your highest number gear to get your strength stat up 2 points, which doesn't really mean anything or make a noticeable difference. But the perks you have on gear are really, really cool sometimes. For example, the way I built my version of Kratos out, he could kind of freeze time when he dodged, which kind of made him like Bayonetta, but he could also restore health by doing a finishing move on an enemy, which kind of made the game like Doom. And it was just really neat that I could kind of make my ultimate ideal version of an action game with these systems this time. Now, if you loved the action in God of War 2018, I can guarantee you're probably going to like it even more here, and for great reason. They did a really, really good job with it in this one. Now, in terms of the story, that's where I think this is going to get a little bit more contentious and maybe be a matter of taste for some people. The story this time is a lot bigger. It obviously gets a lot more into mythology as it kind of talks about Ragnarok and Fimbulwinter and gets into the 9 realms and everything. Lots more lore, lots more world building to go alongside it. And that's cool, but I will say that the sequel doesn't feel necessarily as intimate as God of War 2018, which was kind of the best part about that game. And don't get me wrong, you still do get those moments. You have plenty of scenes of Kratos and Atreus speaking to one another and having these quiet interpersonal moments, but they're a little more farther and fewer between, and that's for a couple of reasons. For one, this game just has way more characters. I mean, there's a point where I swear to God it introduces like 6 characters who you've never met before at the same time, and suddenly you're kind of supposed to know who they are. And that gives the game a couple of weird problems, the biggest one being pacing. This is a very, very weirdly paced game. You will be kind of
How dare you not give this a 10 out of 10?
Story, and then suddenly go on a 3-hour side diversion with a character you've just met to get their entire story arc. Characters also tend to just kind of say their emotional state in this one. It's a lot less subtle.
Am I streaming Ragnarok when it comes out? Probably not.
A weaker story overall. Mileage may vary here. You might like that a lot more, but it feels like a little bit of a more generic Hollywood action movie. That's fine. It's a sequel. You can expect something like that from this.
I'll only stream games if people show up and support the stream.
God of War 2018 was such a special.
There's a lot of interest
that really
in it.
Felt different than anything else. This feels a little bit more like a Marvel movie, a little more mass appeal, and again, that's okay, but it does lose a little bit of shine.
But if it's going to be around this amount of people,
but let's talk about the completely neutral God of War Ragnarok.
Not worth me spending money
does,
on the game.
And it doesn't
to be honest,
add or subtract too much from that game, other than just kind of
I could just play Gotham Knights instead
again, but in higher quantity. A good example of that comes from, say, the exploration. In God of War 2018, you could explore the Lake of the Nines, which was this cool, small open world area that was just in the middle of the game, and you could just kind of come back to from time to time and do rewarding little side quests and find little things hidden
Team
about.
Xbox here, what's up, Divide Shine?
Cool and fresh at the time. God of War Ragnarok does the same thing, but like times 4. There's like multiple versions of the Lake of the Nines.
People aren't trying to get spoiled in a non-spoiler review.
You're just going to kind of do the same thing. You're going to move throughout them and get collectibles and go into these optional spaces that are really big and well developed and do more puzzles and do more climbing around. And that's great. And let me stress this. Everything that was good in God of War
this comes out next week
is still great here.
PS4 and PS5.
All that exploration feels excellent. All that puzzle solving feels really interesting and cool. Maybe there's a little bit too much of it this time, but for the most part, it's the same. same quality, same very high quality this time. The thing is, it also feels a little bit less special because of that in moments. In God of War 2018, everything felt a little more distinct, and I think by copying things and doing them way, way more, you just sort of lose that a little bit. For example, your companion Mimir returns this time, who's this decapitated head who's on your belt, and in the first game he was great comic relief. Developer Santa Monica Studio seemed to really agree with that, so I want to see what he gives it out of 10. A lot more. Like, he's just quipping constantly or giving you hints about puzzles constantly. That's the kind of example where doing something 10 times more isn't necessarily for the best. It's just kind of more. He's saying God of War is the MCU now, here, which is the fact that this still Kratos just tells jokes game, despite the fact that it's on PS5. It looks kind of the same. It handles loading the same. It's not much of a different experience if you're playing it on a PlayStation 5. I'm going to say this, though. I don't think that matters that much. To be totally honest, God of War Ragnarok kind of feels like the second part of God of War 2018 rather than a full-blown sequel. It's kind of a conclusion to that story. And I think it kind of wouldn't be cool if this part 2 wasn't something that fans who loved the 2018 one were able to play if they haven't gotten a PlayStation 5 yet, which are kind of hard to get if you haven't heard. So I think it's totally okay to make this a PlayStation 4 game first and just kind of put it on the PlayStation 5. What I will say, though, is it adds to that feeling of stagnation. It makes this feel like more of the same. Again, you can expect that from sequels all the time. PlayStation did it this year with Horizon Forbidden West, and that game is great. But it's just something I noticed in this, and I think it's going to make people potentially feel a little disappointed if they were expecting a really big jump in quality. You're about to get so many dislikes. It's about the same. It's not a huge leap forward. That nobody but him can see. It sounds like I'm being a little too harsh on God of War Ragnarok. Midtown, unfortunately. I probably am. At the end of the day, I do think this is a fantastic game, and that's because, I mean, it's God of War. If you liked 2018's God of War, you're going to really like God of War Ragnarok. I love it myself, and I think everything it does is fantastic, even if I have a lot of disappointment with the story. Look, it's just that I think this series is capable of so much. I see so much room for it to grow, and I can really see it becoming a better version of itself. And this game is fantastic, but it's not quite the step up that I was hoping it would be. And I just feel myself wanting to push it and make it a little bit better, even if it means being a little harsh on it. And oh my god, I'm like Kratos. I'm like Kratos, and this game is like my Atreus. Maybe I need to cherish the time that I have with it, instead of trying to push it and put my own expectations on it. Yeah, but I still think 2018's God of War is a slightly better game here. Still got some growing to do, boy.
Yeah, if he said 2018 is better, holy. He ain't give it a review. He ain't give it a score, though. But he did say 2018 was better. Cringy ass YouTuber. Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it was a pretty cringe conclusion. Buy, wait for sale, or never touch.
To control spoilers, I have the HUD off, and most quest pops will be turned off as well. For the most part, I'm going to be showing you as little as possible visually. Some side videos will accompany this later with some more in-depth thoughts. So make sure to subscribe for those for some exclusive bits coming up. Thanks to Sony for the code. Now for my review of God of War Ragnarok. Talking about starting with a bang. I mean, within the first couple minutes, you start out elbow dropping a bear, then kneeing in the head. Any game that starts with you beating the crap out of Gentle Ben is already weighing on the scales in my favor. Ragnarok starts with Kratos and Loki hanging out long after the events of the first game. Needless to say, stuff goes sideways almost instantly, and Kratos and Loki go out to investigate the upcoming chaos and stop what's already started. And yes, that's like sending a serial killer to stop global warming one person at a time. Makes no sense. Kratos acts instantly. Fantastic, but he pointed out more from Guns N' Roses. Riding into this inevitable future on a he's trying not to get roasted in the comments. That's what he's trying. If it gets it done, it's more important than how it does. This video, honestly, liking 2018 better is crazy. Thanks to Sony as well for the code. God of War is a pleasure to look at. First, it's helped by this impressive handling of all these territories.
I'm just looking at the
variety
reviews,
that the
and
designers
this looks way
consistently
better in
throw at you,
2018.
altering your perception of the locations, giving you a feeling of Gaussian scale one moment, then next has you crawling through dwarf homes like a pissy Gandalf visiting the hobbits. It's a sense of scale that these games have always had that nails it. However, you're going to notice that
It wouldn't be God of War if things didn't go sideways.
And letting those locations take a great deal of time to get to you. This isn't to say you don't notice them at first. It's just that it's very patient with the unfolding of exploration. It'll have you see Loki and Kratos rampaging across mountains with lichens pulling down around twisted trees, moisturizing the mud and snow even more, melting it faster, or slowly paddling a boat, yakking with a bodiless head that you carry
Speaking
around.
of you
because
get you
don't wanna
hated,
get lonely.
that is correct.
But it's the character design and the new characters that absolutely
People
impress.
often don't like the
One thing
truth.
here is we see a slightly different Kratos. I won't spoil anything, but there's a scene where you actually see the man underneath a bit, and things begin to make sense. A polarizing
They want to hear
moment
what
where
they
the God of
already
War is brought down
believe
just
is
a little
true.
bit. Everything looks tighter in Ragnarok as well, and there's something about the animations that feel more fluid. It could be the higher level of FPS presentation I'm going to talk about in a bit, but every skill, every single blast from the enemy's magical dark portal spells that are all sent to you in surprise, hoping you'll quiet quit, have particle effects that
Speaking
shower
of how
around
you feel
you and
good, get
fly
your
into
condo
the
on.
air. It's
Live
impressive
and
stuff
deny.
with a sense of impact that
Yeah.
consistently carries the feeling of
People
a
would
massive
rather
doom, what it would be like
have
to be
their
hit by a guy
worldviews
who
reinforced
doesn't need
and
to sharpen his
challenged.
axe, because he's just going to push it through you slowly. The new attacks, the characters, the magic, the worlds are all mostly explorable as well as you take on the main and side missions across all the realms, each with their different looks, puzzles, and sometimes people. God of War has also made the same strides
Well, like
as
mini
The Last of Us
Kratoses.
and other Sony titles in the accessibility department, which stretch across audio as well as graphics and gameplay. It adjusts every part of combat to make it easier or harder, completely removed from the difficulty choice that the player can also make. From QTEs to the puzzles to pathfinding, every single option can be changed, including high contrast for enemies and all kinds of colorblind options for people who want to change things up a bit. Now, speaking of options, let's discuss
Imagine
the
having
thing
colorblind
that a lot of
options.
people want to know about, which is the graphics and their options. 4K resolution with a targeted 30 FPS. They have a dynamic resolution upscaled to 4K.
It's crazy
and
how
targets
all
60
these
FPS.
games
They
have
have a high frame rate mode
extensive
resolution, which is
accessibility
targeting
options.
40 FPS and high frame rate mode.
And
which is
Avengers
dynamic
still doesn't.
resolution upscaled. After playing hours with all of them, I can say this, 30 just feels way too stiff in the animation department and a bit juddery despite being able to turn your motion blur from 1 to 10, 10 making a Vaseline-looking mess and 1 removing it altogether. It never feels right. Not only that, but the temporal upscaling actually more than good enough to keep the picture image quality stable regardless. One thing you will see here is some pop-in. On the PS5,
they
there
have
were
pop-in.
numerous times where rocks
Interesting.
and snow elements or farther off locations had small parts
Skill Up
pop
didn't
in
mention
and
the
out,
pop-in.
even at 30 FPS mode. The PS4 Pro, I found no real drops in the FPS for the hours I spent there. I did play mostly on the PS5, 60 FPS mode, and other than 1 or 2 stutters and then pop-in that I mentioned, it was smooth and offered a consistency that God of War sort of requires when it's throwing 5 enemies at you, all of them using special
Sounds
moves,
like it's
abilities,
mostly
and just
stable,
were
though.
forced to take you down while you're summoning spectral creatures to smash them as well. The 3D audio also helps in battle immensely. I'm going to talk about that in a moment.
3D audio.
God of War was a looker. Here, larger and broader and with a more diverse
Gotta add a
cast,
3D
God
audio.
of War Ragnarok is equal to that game and in some places better with options galore, new enemies everywhere.
Dub reviewer.
It's just a profoundly spectacular looking game.
He's
regardless
blurring
of the
out
platform you're
anything
playing
that could give you a
and
spoiler.
playing it is what matters. Let's talk about that gameplay. God of War Ragnarok plays much like the original game, so let's use that as a mini base. One of the reasons the game is so damned hard to review is that within the first hour or so, you have spoilers all over the screen because Ragnarok does change a number of elements within the game world, and you're going to see those if I put them in the HUD. Kratos wielding his weapons of choice continues here. Skills,
What's my
helping
honest
you battle it out.
God of War?
Combos that in
2018
finisher
was-
stance
I thought it was
changes,
fine,
moves
but
for some weapons and statuses on
I felt
statuses
the,
building up.
I
Switching
felt they
weapons
really
to
didn't.
opposite statuses can do
there
more
wasn't
damage. So
enough
like
combat
someone
for
on
my
fire, then
taste.
Switching out to the ice weapons hits harder. Every ability is also tangible. I have to say this right from the start. It's incredible how deep the combo system is. And when you add everything else there there is a ton going on.
I felt like it relied a
heavy
little too
attacks
heavily
and
on
successful moves increase
cutscenes
rage, which has a
and-
couple different forms.
and
Dodging,
puzzles.
diving, and moves attached to them are all here as well. Now, as I test games on all the difficulties to see how
I wanted to
enemies
fight a
react and
wide
what
variety of
changes occur,
enemies.
I like to note some of these things down. A few notes. First, enemies
the-
don't just go
with-
up in
with
hit
the
points or
deep
hit harder
combat.
as you climb difficulty, something that a lot of people in God of War originally complained about. They do become much more aggressive here than
All right,
it felt
Captain.
in the original game. They use powers far more often.
Enjoy Marvel's
depending
Avengers.
on the difficulty here. While you do get some sponginess, it definitely feels a bit less than the prior title. Though you have to stay on top of the upgrades the higher you do turn that difficulty, because it's not hard to find a boss that can one or two shot you if you haven't outfitted right, or you just, well, don't get hit once or twice. Speaking of outfits, Kratos' armor continues to impress, with more and more pieces being unlocked as you move forward, with the ability to have you make all kinds of changes, as well as that amulet to add blessings that you repair as you go on. Sets of the same type can give you set bonuses for adjustments to the requisite powers, and those are things like doing more damage if you're 75% below or lower on your health and so forth. You can also have runic attacks. Companions have their own skills and experience points as well as special artifacts they can get. It seamlessly moves, though, between solitary action sometimes to a motley crew, adding risk as you continue to play narratively against the power you gain in your skills and their movements, changing out as everything transforms and adjusts.
I feel like a superhero game
who's with you at any one time. Each location that Kratos and Kin move through,
with like
many new missions unfold. As each continues, new missions
a
unlock,
Ghost of
usually
Tsushima
as pushers or pullers
size
in quest
open
design,
world,
meaning the pullers will pull you farther into the main mission area
with
after
God
the
of
main
War
plot is
combat,
actually hit and completed.
God of War
While the
Ragnarok
pushing kind of
combat
missions will push you to a new location for a main story
would
or
be
back
pretty
to
sick.
another one. It doesn't come without its issues, though, and I have to stress this. The game is long. It's longer than the original. Depending on difficulty, you're going to see 35 to 55 hours for the main story, if not more, and maybe 60 to 70 hours for 100%, depending on what options you choose and if you want to get that 100%. I'll say this, you get to play other characters for sure, I'll leave it at that, and they are just as fun as Kratos. The game filters this to you through glacial pacing, though, especially in the middle half. You can speed this up a bit, but the game's pacing can be all over the place in the center, especially if you're a fan of Kratos. Sometimes it rewards you with a 20-second cutscene for 2 hours of work. Hard work at that. Other times, it's 30 minutes of just sort of sitting there, sometimes hitting a button or two as characters talk for ages. This draws directly into the strengths and weaknesses of God of War Ragnarok.
Cutscene
Its
war.
strength is
Holy,
just how
confirmed.
much is here. It's truly Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi all as one, and that's not an empty
Play as other
comparison.
characters, of
There are
course.
actually a lot of very easy to see connecting points between those stories and this one. But at the same time, imagine a bit of holiday.
I mean,
Star
obviously
Wars
you have
special in
Betrayal.
there as
I mean,
well.
I thought it was
This game
obvious,
also
but
does have a lot of comedic
you have
tones
Kratos,
to push back against
you
the
have
dire feeling
Atreus,
of Ragnarok. I think for
you
the most
have
part,
that
the
black
hits,
girl
let me
that
add
they
the side
introduced.
missions and what you do also did not give me the same sense of accomplishment all the time that God of War did. For example, there's a mission here that has you go kill some raiders to clear out a space, and I'm not quite sure what I expected, but I expected more than basically doing.
I'm not sure if they'll
just
let
that,
you play as
cleaning them
Freya,
out, and it reminded
but
me
they
more
might.
of, let's say, a Ubisoft kind of mission than it does a God of War one. It's not that those missions didn't occur in the original game. It's just here it was a little bit of a downer, especially because of how long it had taken to get there in the first place. There was an unevenness there that can really sort of crop up.
This man really
depending on
say he was
exactly
sitting there
how
for
you
like
take
30
what missions.
minutes
Some people will play this and not have that issue because
pressing
of the mission
buttons
structure
for a
and what
cutscene.
missions
Holy.
they take, side ones or main ones. Other people may run into even a longer period, and then it also depends
Feel
on
like
what
after
you
I
do
said,
as
the
a
open
player
world Justice
and
League
what your
game to be
focus
made.
is and who you like within the game story. I personally liked them all. When Kratos ain't killing, he's going back to his house, the dwarves built, probably giving confession and
That could be the
shifts.
second
Killed so
game they're
many
working
people.
on.
He isn't, though. He's not apologizing for anything. In fact, he's there upgrading his weapons of war to be even more powerful. As you progress, you get more access to unique items that help you go to other locations, some in new spots, some in places you've already visited, consistently giving you that reason, but not demanding that you go back to do them. The game's bosses. So I'm going to keep a lot of that out of here and just tell you that there's a ton of bosses. Each one offers a unique challenge, something diverse that you can sort of dig into and try to take them down. That being said, one of the coolest battles I had was not a boss battle, but it was a fight on a super fog-shrouded plain where you can barely see any enemies running towards you. And on higher difficulties, that might be one of the larger challenges ever in a God of War game, just due to the restricted sight and how it all worked. It was a phenomenal moment in the game. When it comes to gameplay and God of War Ragnarok, Don't expect huge changes. Expect fixes and improvements to the original, as well as a more diverse cast and one that really hits it pretty much in all spectrums. And I gotta talk about the spectrums, and that includes the audio ones.
I know what the patch was for Forgotten Knights. I have no idea.
Wait. You're not gonna wipe your feet, are you? Okay then. Your bedrooms are there. The kitchen is just over there. Anybody need a snack? Kratos? Snack?
I do not need a snack.
But I think we all have a better idea of who we're dealing with. Now, what you did to his boys. Self-defense. Dying is what we Aesir live for. And let's be honest, they were kinda useless.
First sound. I don't know what it sounds like when a bear shits out the remains of 1,000 hikers, but I assume it's nothing close still to the Kratos howl of a war god in the middle of battle. I love it. When he flings that axe out into the enemy, that layered sound, it's perfect. Cracking the top of an ancient chest and finding a single pouch inside because Kratos has the worst RNG ever really actually sounds like sliding the top of a rock slab off of something else. It's incredible 3D audio. The separation works just so well here, from allies calling out one-liners about how to help you or lead you the right way to the sound of an enemy getting ready to power attack you from the back. It's excellent. Sound samples are very high bit rate. There's no cramping in the spectrum, and everything has its own place. And that also includes the music. Bear McCreary takes the reins for the music of God of War, the original game, and returns here. From Snowpiercer to the Rings of Power.
I don't like Avengers anymore. My opinion of Avengers is pretty much the same as it's been
consistently shifting the expectations
since I've been making Avengers content on this channel.
Instruments that fit the locations and history that Ragnarok loosely sits in, sifts out into big budget movie territories, then seamlessly filters back down to incredible sadness when it calls for it. Bear's always been very open about the original jump into God of War being something he was not expecting, learning about Nordic-styled influences, and his ability to carry in a freshness to the soundtrack continues with Ragnarok. I adore this. I will listen to the soundtrack outside of the game. And another thing I would, even though it'd be really weird, is listen to the voices. This is probably one of the best casts I remember ever in a video game. Gods, and a ton of them. Odin's incredible. One of the most nascent performances and looks in a game that I can ever really remember for Odin, or movies and TV shows alike, taking Richard Schiff from West Wing and that half-eaten guy from Jurassic Park, packing his performance in as Odin. It is nuanced, it is subtle, it is a complete change, one that will have you questioning everything throughout this game. Thor's played by Ryan Hurst, who was Opie in Sons of
Might have to hop on some Gotham Knights later.
Well. I can't dive too far into it due to spoilers, but the approach is not something I expected for any of these characters. This keeps the story fresh, as none of the characters are like their representations elsewhere, meaning every action they take or thing they say makes you compare and recompare and contrast to your new understanding of them, and you really only have the game source material now because they make sure you understand that this game is completely separate from any representation elsewhere. Think of it like a Russian nesting doll, where each doll you remove suddenly changes color. When you remove it all, you find out that the only color was in the very center, and each shell was a bit transparent, letting every single moment color and fade throughout the performances. That is exactly what's going on here until you get to that nice, tasty center. It's incredibly deft-hand at aiming for something unique, but without being alienating. And of course, Kratos returned, that angry bear protecting his cubs.
Best way to get very hard mission in New Game Plus.
Beginning to realize that for him, age becomes power, and it's different than while being exciting, it's also dangerous.
It's randomly generated.
Hard and fast in God of War. But death is hard and fast in God of War, and you get to see all of this played out through every single character in the game.
Solve crimes,
phenomenal voice cast.
Gather clues.
Let's talk about the fun factor here. On a battle, Kratos
go out on patrol,
to stay out of this war, gets dragged back in. We've seen it before. It's another
and check
man
your map.
screaming the entire way. Doesn't want to go to war.
See if you have any.
Single-handedly keeps starting it. This is a war pig eating bacon from a trough. No idea just how cannibalistic every single action he's taking is, and that's the best part. Even though we have multiple games in this series that all feels like this, other sections will be up to the players themselves, depending on who they like as a focus to the story. God of War's combat remains true to its base, but explores options. It continues to be rewarding as well when it comes to normal exploration. And the sheer amount of content in this is impressive because it feels like pretty much 2 games in one. I can admit the center dragged on, and some of the side quests were not as good as I had hoped, but the amazing cast, unique perspectives just smashed through any hesitation that I had. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system. This is well worth getting right away. I loved it. There is some slowness there, but the expanded cast is incredible from start to finish, and it offers a tantalizing glimpse at the future and unique versions of these gods as they are. We've seen them in other games, movies, comics, and shows, and somehow this keeps it fresh, which absolutely blew my mind. Going out and getting actors like Ryan as well as Richard has elevated this to a place I never expected it would
Kratos battling
ever go.
Freya. Holy.
This is absolutely award-winning quality when it comes to characterization and surprises. There are some really cool changes coming up. So that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Check out more videos from me. I'll discuss some things a little bit more in depth in some other.
All right. So I think we could pretty much tell from all the God of War Ragnarok reviews that everyone's basically going to be giving this a 9 or a 10. And if you're a fan of the God of War series, you're probably going to enjoy this one, I would imagine. So need not worry if you're a God of War fan. I'm sure your purchase will be justified. Sounds like it's a lot bigger, a lot longer than the other one, and it's got some notable improvements. So we'll see it. We'll see about it. Game of the year will be interesting. Will they choose Ragnarok or Elden Ring? Only time will tell. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna make a Gotham Knights video, and I might stream Gotham Knights later as well. Thanks everyone coming out. I'm Sadot the Gamer signing